Chapter 1301 Law Seal in Rank 4 Part 1. Current understanding of the conceptual energy of void, 100%. When my understanding of void energy was at 75%, I absorbed one peak rank 3 Eldritch Horror to increase it by 1.5%, bringing it to 76.5%. But this time, to increase my understanding by another 1.5% and reach 100%, I needed to use 2 bodies of the peak rank 3 horrors. Evan muttered to himself, looking thoughtful. It seems that, unlike real void crystals, which ignore the level of your comprehension and increase it by a fixed amount, the energy transformed using the rune of absorption doesn't have the same effect. The higher your comprehension, the more energy you need to convert in order to increase it. Evan observed the surging void energy within his core, and the corners of his lips arched upward slightly. Although it was unexpected that the void crystals created using eldritch energy were slightly different from genuine void crystals, and that they couldn't increase his understanding by a fixed amount, he wasn't particularly concerned. He knew that, in the future, when he attempted to comprehend life, death, and soul energy using the rune of absorption, he would need far more resources than before. But for now, he set those concerns aside and focused on the matter at hand. I can feel it, my core wants to break free from the restraints that are preventing it from ascending to a higher level, Evan said, gazing at the unstable void energy fluctuating within his core. It hadn't been long since he had broken through to rank 3 in Azragoth world, yet now he was already at the peak of rank 3. Normally, after a breakthrough, people require a long period to stabilize their core before attempting another advancement. The higher the rank, the longer it took to stabilize. After reaching rank 3, a person typically needed months or even years to stabilize their core before they could even begin absorbing world essence to progress toward mid-level rank 3. For most, it took years before they could successfully advance from beginner level rank 3 to mid-level rank 3. But Evan's primordial monarch core was entirely different. Even though he had only recently advanced to rank 3 and had just reached the peak of rank 3 a few hours ago, his core remained perfectly stable, already prepared for the next breakthrough. Well, since everything is ready, there is no reason to delay. With that, Evan left the underground training room and made his way to the garden of the house. As he entered the garden, he spotted Octavius sitting atop a pile of essence stones, busy brewing potions. The potions he was creating were specifically needed by Sylvan for the Dryads, and all the essence stones and required ingredients had been provided by him. Evan ignored Octavius, who remained absorbed in his work, and shifted his gaze to the scattered bottles lying across the ground. There were dozens of bottles, some filled with potions, others containing pills. His eyes swiftly scanned each bottle, their information flashing before him. Moments later, his gaze locked onto a small bottle containing a marble-sized, blue-colored pill. With a flick of his spiritual power, the pill bottle flew toward him. Catching it mid-air, Evan turned around and headed back inside the house, returning to the training room and looking at the pill in his hands. Law Resonance Pill Mid-Level Rank 4, a pill made using some rare herbs that contain a small amount of the power of laws and the heart of a rank 4 unicorn. Upon consumption, the user can briefly come into contact with laws, aiding them in understanding the power of laws and assisting in the condensation of their law seal. It's a pity that my title, the owner of Eldoria City, is still on cooldown. If not, I wouldn't need to use this pill to sense the power of laws, Evan muttered, shaking his head with a sigh. Within Eldoria City, he had the authority to control everything, including the power of laws. When he had first obtained the title, he had tested its power by altering the weather, and with just a single thought, he had been able to make a sunny day transform into a heavy rainstorm. It was similar to possessing an inner world, a phenomenon that only became possible upon reaching rank 6 as a core evolver. A place where everything is under absolute control, where one can manipulate reality itself with just a thought. If Evan could return to Eldoria City, condensing his law seal would have been effortless, with zero risk involved. However, since he had used the title's power not long ago, it was still on cooldown. As a result, he had no choice but to rely on the Law Resonance Pill, a method that most people used when attempting to break through to rank 4. Although I am confident that I can create a law seal even without the aid of my title or this pill, it's always better to be cautious and use every available advantage to achieve the best possible result. With that thought, Evan uncorked the bottle and retrieved the light blue pill, which shimmered with a hazy glow. A strange fragrance wafted from the pill, momentarily making Evan dizzy. For a brief moment, he sensed an unfamiliar power, one that had previously been beyond his perception. Is this the power of laws? He murmured, raising an eyebrow in surprise. After a few seconds of silent contemplation, Evan summoned Elysia and Zorda, his rank 4 shadow undeads, to stand guard and prevent any unexpected interruptions. Once everything was ready, he wasted no more time and tossed the pill into his mouth. The moment the pill touched his tongue, it burst apart, releasing a surge of immense energy. The shattered fragments melted into a hazy blue liquid, shimmering faintly as they spread throughout his body. Almost immediately, Evan felt his affinity with the power of laws reaches its peak. At the same time, the conceptual energy of void within his core began to tremble violently. Chapter 1302 Law Seal in Rank 4 Part 2. The moment Evan consumed the Law Resonance Pill, his affinity with the laws reached its peak. Even though he had yet to reach Rank 4, he could clearly sense the strange, omnipresent power of laws around him. Within his core, the conceptual energy of void, which had already reached 100% understanding and was ready to condense into a law seal, began to tremble violently. It surged against the walls of his core, pressing outward as if eager to burst forth. Swish! With a single thought, a deep purple, illusionary image of a world appeared above Evan's head. This was his illusionary world, engulfed in the cosmic solar flames of the Solarian sun fruit. The moment Evan released his illusionary world, the void energy within his core became even more restless. However, he did not allow the void energy to erupt from his core just yet. Instead, he focused on sensing the various powers of law around him, made visible due to the effects of the Law Resonance Pill. He could perceive numerous laws, each radiating unique power. The law of fire crackled with a destructive intensity, capable of reducing anything to ashes. The law of wind swept through his senses, its sharpness and swiftness akin to the edge of a sword blade, and other different kinds of laws as well. Evan ignored these laws and tried to find the law of void. Yet before he could even locate it, 3 immensely powerful and dominant laws suddenly surged toward him of their own accord. They encircled him, possessively, forcing away all other law energies that attempted to approach. Even without direct confirmation, Evan instantly recognized them. They were the laws of life, death, and soul. A wry smile crossed his face. Even though my understanding of the conceptual energy of void is already at 100%, while my comprehension of these 3 energies is still at its lowest level, I can sense them before even feeling the law of void, Evan sighed inwardly. His affinity for these 3 laws was so overwhelming that their presence made it nearly impossible for him to sense any other law. These 3 laws acted like 3 jealous wives, refusing to let any other woman approach their man. But Evan knew that the time limit of the Law Resonance Pill was running out and he could not afford to waste any more time. He took a deep breath, ignored the 3 laws, and forcefully focused on locating the law of void. Though difficult, he eventually found it, circling around him at a distance. Yet, just like before, it could not approach him because of the laws of life, death, and soul, which continued to ward it off. Without hesitation, Evan extended his power and forcefully pulled the law of void toward him. The moment Evan drew the law of void closer, the conceptual energy of void inside his core reached its breaking point. He could no longer control it and boom! The conceptual energy of void erupted violently from his primordial monarch core, leaving his body and emerging as a dense, deep purple mist. The law of void that Evan had just pulled closer immediately resonated with his conceptual energy of void. Drawn to each other, the 2 forces merged seamlessly. The moment this fusion occurred, Evan felt a new sense of control over the void law. However, he quickly noticed a critical issue. As soon as the conceptual energy of void merged with the power of the law of void, the void law's power began to diminish rapidly. It was as if someone had diluted pure milk by adding too much water. Evan wasn't surprised by this phenomenon, as Anastasia had already explained this process to him in detail when teaching him about condensing a law seal. He channeled his spiritual power and carefully guided the weakened power of the void law, now mixed with his conceptual energy of void, toward his illusionary world, which still hovered above his head. As soon as the power of the void law came into contact with his illusionary world, a violent reaction occurred. His illusionary world trembled uncontrollably, shaking as if struck by a devastating earthquake. Deep cracks spread across its surface as if it would shatter at any moment. Evan, however, remained calm. Using his immensely powerful spiritual energy, he stabilized the chaos. For most core evolvers, infusing the power of laws into their illusionary world without damaging it was an incredibly difficult task. This was because their spiritual power was usually either equal to or weaker than the rank of their core. But Evan's case was entirely different. His spiritual power was not only far beyond the rank of his core, it was also extremely pure. This allowed him to easily stabilize his illusionary world, even under the violent impact of the Void Law's power. As he continued to direct the Void Law's energy into his illusionary world, the effect of the Law Resonance Pill finally wore off. He could no longer sense the various laws around him as he had before. However, since his conceptual energy of void had already merged with the law of void, he could still feel its power and continue guiding it into his illusionary world. It took Evan nearly 2 hours to fully integrate the void law's power into his illusionary world without damaging it. Even after completing this process, he still had to actively maintain control to prevent the power from destabilizing and destroying his illusionary world. Now, I need to condense a law seal using the weakened power of the void law that I just pulled into my illusionary world. Evan muttered under his breath, taking a deep breath. His mind grew calm and focused and he recalled everything Anastasia had taught him about condensing a law seal. His eyes gradually narrowed. There are many ways to create a law seal. Although the process I want to use is extremely difficult, if succeed, the benefits I will gain will be far beyond ordinary. Chapter 1303 Law Seal in Rank 4 Part 3. There are several ways to condense a law seal. One of the most common methods involves condensing the law seal directly into the illusionary world. To do this, a core evolver must pull their conceptual energy, mixed with the power of the law, into their illusionary world and then form the law seal according to the design they envision. Once the law seal is formed, it must be connected to the illusionary world, allowing the core evolver to mobilize the power of laws using the law seal as a medium. This is the standard method used by most core evolvers when condensing their law seal. Another method involves using only half of their conceptual energy mixed with the power of law to create a defective law seal. This method is typically used by core evolvers whose spiritual power is insufficient to keep their illusionary world stable under the pressure of the power of law. However, this alternative approach comes at a heavy cost. A law seal condensed in this way will be significantly weaker than one created using all of the conceptual energy. Furthermore, once a core evolver condenses a weakened law seal, their chances of advancing to higher levels will also be greatly reduced. The third method is somewhat similar to the first, but it takes the process one step further. After fully condensing the law seal and connecting it to their illusionary world, the core evolver will then attempt to bind the law seal to one of their skills or authorities. By connecting a law seal with a skill or authority, a core evolver can greatly amplify the power of said skill or authority. However, this method is extremely difficult and highly dangerous. A core evolver can only attempt this step after fully condensing their law seal and successfully linking it to their illusionary world using the first method. If anything goes wrong during the process of connecting the law seal to a skill or authority, the law seal will immediately collapse, causing severe damage, or even complete destruction, of the illusionary world. Even worse, there is a chance that the core evolver will permanently lose the skill or authority they attempted to enhance. For these reasons, 99.98% of core evolvers choose to condense their law seal using the first or second method. Only a very small number dare to attempt the third method. Aside from its difficulty and risks, the real reason most core evolvers avoid this method is their lack of spiritual power. Condensing a law seal and linking it to the illusionary world already requires a tremendous amount of spiritual power. After completing this step, most core evolvers simply do not have enough spiritual power left to also connect the law seal with a skill or authority. What makes this process even more challenging is that during the process of condensing a law seal, a core evolver cannot use potions or pills to restore their spiritual power. If they attempt to replenish their energy using external means, the law seal will instantly collapse, and they will have to start over from the beginning. With his vast spiritual power, Evan naturally wanted to use the third method. After considering all the factors, he had already decided which skill he would connect to his law seal. Surprisingly, he did not choose any of his authorities. According to Anastasia, the power boost a skill or authority receives from a law seal depends on what kind of law seal is being condensed. Since Evan was condensing a law seal of void, he felt that none of his current authorities were suitable. Neither Death Guardian nor Guardian of the Primordial Shadow Realm would benefit from the Void Law's enhancement. Although Master of Shadows might undergo some unexpected changes after being strengthened by the Void Law, Evan had something else in mind, something far more suited to receive the power of Void. Gaze of Monarch. Evan muttered softly, his expression deep as he stared at the skill. The Gaze of Monarch was a large-scale skill, and at present, only 2 of its effects had been unlocked. The first effect allowed him to release endless killing intent across a vast area, immobilizing all enemies caught within its range. In the Tomb of the Ancient, when Azeroth used this skill, his killing intent spread across the entire tomb, covering a region that stretched tens of hundreds of millions of miles. The second effect of Gaze of Monarch was a buff-like enhancement that greatly strengthened his shadow undeads. Both of these effects had an immense impact on both the physical and spiritual levels. The first effect, in particular, was especially devastating. If an opponent's spirit was not strong enough, they would be completely paralyzed under the overwhelming pressure of his killing intent, not even being able to lift a finger. When he had created his domain while breaking through to rank 2, Evan had used the skill, Void Senses, as the base which allowed his domain to directly target the soul of his enemies. Because of this, his illusionary world also inherited this unique trait, granting it the ability to inflict soul damage. If he connected the Void Law seal to the Gaze of Monarch, a skill that already had soul-targeting effects, then the enhancement it received would be maximized. Once he was certain of his decision, Evan immediately took action. Using his spiritual power, he carefully guided the Void Law's energy, now mixed with his conceptual energy of Void, that he had just pulled into his illusionary world. He then began the process of condensing it into a law seal. The first step of creating a law seal was not particularly difficult. Evan simply needed to use his spiritual power to shape the Void Law's energy into the base form of his law seal. There were many possible shapes he could choose: a sword, a spear, a bell, or any other form. The shape of a law seal would also influence its characteristics, granting it certain traits based on its form. Evan had already decided on the shape he wanted long ago, so he did not hesitate. As he manipulated the Void Law's energy, it slowly began to take shape. Gradually, it transformed into a small, eerie eye, one that looked remarkably similar to the ominous eye that appears in the sky whenever he used his Gaze of Monarch skill. Chapter 1305 Law Seal and Rank 4 Part 5. Evan was stunned when he saw the Origin Essence, which had remained silent in his body since he obtained it, suddenly reacting. Without warning, a brilliant blue light burst forth, and the Origin Essence gushed out of his body, rushing into the illusionary world suspended above his head. Once inside, the Origin Essence moved swiftly toward the eerie-looking eye, the Void Law seal, which hung in the middle of the sky, and began to orbit around it. At the same time, the 6 strings, coming from the 6 different directions, that had just merged with the Law seal became visible once again. As they reappeared, the Origin Essence suddenly surged into them. Through these strings, the Origin Essence first merged with the Law seal, and as it did, the bright purple color of the seal began to darken, gradually approaching black. The moment its color changed, the power radiating from the seal escalated to an entirely new level, causing Evan's entire world to tremble violently. Once again, cracks appeared across the entire world. The sky fractured like delicate glass, while the ground caved in, forming deep ditches and massive canyons. The 6 strings, which were originally white, gradually changed color, turning a deep, dark purple, identical to the altered Law seal. As the immense power of the transformed Law seal flowed through the 6 strings, it spread across the cracks and fractures that had formed in the world. Evan could feel his world becoming more complete, yet at the same time, he sensed that the nature of his Law seal had changed in some way. However, because he had not yet fully connected the Law seal with his world, he was unable to discern exactly what had changed. As the power continued to flow through the strings and merge with the world, the cracks gradually closed, allowing the world to perfectly assimilate the energy of the transformed Law seal. This process lasted for nearly 5 hours, and by the time it was complete, the size of his world had expanded massively, almost doubling in scale. However, even after the origin essence had been fully absorbed into his world, the lost seal did not return to its previous color. Instead, it remained a deep, dark purple. Evan had no idea what kind of transformation the origin essence had brought to his lost seal, but he had no time to dwell on it. The moment the origin essence was exhausted, the lost seal began to tremble violently, as if it were about to collapse at any moment. The 6 strings connected to it also shook uncontrollably, as though the lost seal was trying to break free from them. Let's first fully connect the lost seal with the world before thinking about anything else. Evan muttered to himself before proceeding with the next phase of the operation. The 6 strings, which had become visible due to the influence of the origin essence, once again began to fade as they merged further with the lost seal. As the strings fused with the seal, the power contained within seal flowed outward through the 6 connections, spreading in all directions. At the same time, the lost seal itself began to blur as if it were disappearing along with the strings. However, as the seal started dissolving, the power of law within it reacted violently, causing numerous cracks to appear on the 6 strings. Evan was forced to continuously use his spiritual power and the power of his world to repair the strings, preventing them from shattering completely. Yet, despite his efforts, the intense assault from the lost seal made the cracks widen gradually. Damn it! Evan muttered, his mouth twitching in frustration. With my high spiritual power, this process shouldn't have been so difficult. But the change brought by the origin essence has greatly increased the power of my lost seal, making it far harder to connect with my world. Realizing that he had no other choice, Evan poured even more of his spiritual power into repairing the strings. Under his continuous effort, the strings finally showed signs of stabilization. The cracks that had formed on them gradually closed, and the lost seal resumed its merging process with the world. However, Evan wasn't happy about this process. Although he had successfully initiated the final merging process, the consumption of his spiritual power had been immense. At the current rate of depletion, he was certain that, by the time the lost seal was fully connected to his world, he would have insufficient spiritual power left to link it with his gaze of monarch skill. If he tried to conserve his spiritual power, he would fail to fully integrate the lost seal with his world, which would result in its immediate destruction. And if the lost seal collapsed, it would inflict irreversible damage on his world. If that happened, it would take him a long time to recover before he could attempt to create another lost seal again. On top of these concerns, the origin essence was also an issue. He had already used up all the origin essence he had received from the will of Earth. If his lost seal was destroyed and he had to recreate it from scratch, he would no longer have the origin essence to enhance it again. Damn it! Evan cursed under his breath. Now I don't know if the change brought by the origin essence is a blessing or a curse. But regardless of his frustrations, he had no choice but to push forward, using what remained of his spiritual power to finalize the connection between his lost seal and his world. It took him a few more hours to completely integrate the lost seal, and by the time he finished, he had less than 5% of his spiritual power left, and it was nowhere near enough to link his lost seal with his gaze of monarch skill. Evan felt a wave of disappointment wash over him. He did not want to miss this rare opportunity, as a core evolver could only connect their lost seal to their skill at the moment of its creation. If he missed this chance, he would never be able to connect his lost seal with his skill in the future. As he pondered his options, the lost seal he had just merged with his world suddenly began to tremble. Evan sighed when he saw this, as he knew he had to make a choice. Either he moved forward with the next step to connect his lost seal with his skill, or end his breakthrough here. If he hesitated too long, the newly integrated lost seal would destabilize once again. It seems I have no choice but to end my breakthrough here. Evan muttered with a sigh. But just as he was about to finish the process, a sudden thought flashed through his mind and his eyes lit up. Chapter 1306, Lost Seal in Rank 4, Part 6, Last. How could I forget about it? Evan slapped his forehead, immediately stopping himself from finishing his breakthrough without first connecting his gaze of monarch skill to his lost seal. He took a deep breath, his expression turning serious. I will only have 5 seconds to finish everything, he muttered in a low voice before activating his authority, Death Guardian. The moment his authority was activated, his stat points increased 5-fold. With the sudden surge in his intelligence stat, his spiritual power was also greatly enhanced, reaching an unparalleled level. His mind became incredibly active, and everything within his perception seemed to slow down to an extreme. His tremendous spiritual power spread over the deep, dark purple void law seal, instantly stabilizing it. In fact, under the overwhelming influence of his spiritual power, the law seal became completely fixed in place, as though it had been glued down with the strongest adhesive in existence. From the law seal, a thin thread, formed using his spiritual power and infused with a trace of void law, began to stretch outward. The thread left the portal of the illusionary world and appeared outside, making its way into Evan's body. Normally, controlling this thread required immense precision. If even the slightest mistake was made while guiding the power of law into the body before fully breaking through to rank 4, the result would be catastrophic. The body would instantly burst into a mist of blood. But because of his tremendous spiritual power, it wasn't a problem for Evan. As soon as the thread entered his body, he carefully guided it with his spiritual power, ensuring it reached his soul safely. The moment the thread reached his soul and made contact with it, countless options appeared before his eyes, listing all of his skills and authorities. Since he had only 5 seconds, Evan didn't bother scanning through the list. Instead, he immediately focused on his gaze of monarch skill. As soon as he selected the skill, the thread that had touched his soul immediately attempted to drill into his soul. However, the moment it tried to do so, a strange force suddenly surrounded his soul, blocking the thread's entry. Damn it! I completely forgot about this. Evan cursed, quickly realizing the issue. Because of his Death Guardian authority, he was immune to all damage for the duration of 5 seconds. However, this very invulnerability was now preventing the thread from properly drilling into his soul. If he didn't disable this effect, the thread would be unable to connect, and everything would be for nothing. With no other choice, Evan exerted control over his authority, creating a small gap in the protective force. The instant the thread found an opening, it pierced into his soul. A sharp, stabbing pain immediately assaulted his mind, as if a needle had been driven straight into his very essence. Evan gritted his teeth and took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay focused while controlling the thread that had now entered his soul. 2 seconds left, his eyes narrowed as he checked the remaining time. Pouring even more spiritual power into the thread, he pushed it deeper, guiding it toward a small rune located deep within his soul. The rune, shaped like an eerie eye, emanated an aura of absolute indifference, as if it could see everything yet cared for nothing. This was the skill rune representing his gaze of monarch. Without hesitation, Evan let the thread touch the rune. The moment contact was made, the law seal within his illusionary world trembled slightly. The power of law surged through the thread, flowing out of the illusionary world, entering Evan's soul, and merging with the skill rune. The red golden rune shuddered as the void law's power fused into it in a faint, deep dark purple hue, identical to the void law seal's transformed color, began to emerge within the rune's pupil. A powerful wave of void law energy washed over the skill rune, and in that instant, Evan felt his skill change. He wanted to check the new description, but there was no time. As soon as the power of law fully merged with the rune, the thread was completely absorbed into it, and at that exact moment, the 5-second duration of his Death Guardian authority came to an end. A powerful wave of weakness immediately engulfed Evan. It felt as if every ounce of his strength had been sucked dry, as if he had been a god just moments ago but had now been reduced to a mere mortal. In reality, his strength had not actually decreased. He was still as strong as before he had activated Death Guardian. However, because he had just lost hundreds of thousands of stat points in an instant, the contrast made him feel unbearably weak. Evan shook his head, clearing his thoughts before refocusing on the void law seal inside his illusionary world. Everything is done now, he muttered softly, gathering his willpower. With the power of his world, Evan manipulated the law seal. This time, the seal showed no abnormal reaction. The 6 threads, which had previously merged with the law seal, became faintly visible once again and began to release a tremendous aura throughout the illusionary world. Suddenly, the space surrounding the void law seal cracked, then shattered completely. The eerie, ice-shaped void law seal sank into the space crack, vanishing from sight. However, the 6 threads remained intact, still linked to the law seal. As the seal disappeared, the threads trembled slightly, and the crack in space slowly began to heal itself. Once the fracture was fully mended, the 6 threads faded once more, completely disappearing from view. Through his connection with the Void Law seal, Evan could feel its presence deep within the void, silently channeling the power of Law throughout his illusionary world. As the Law energy flowed, his illusionary world, which had already been at the threshold of real world, finally transformed completely and took the last and final step. At the same time, a notification flashed before his eyes. You have successfully broken through to rank 4. Chapter 1307. Wait and observe. In a room covered with pale blue ice, a beastly figure, resembling a yeti, lay still, his eyes closed. Suddenly, the beast opened his eyes as if he had sensed something. His deep blue eyes, glowing faintly, turned toward the icy wall beside him. He stared at it for several seconds in silence before standing up and making his way toward the exit. Stepping out of the room, the beast entered a long, frozen corridor and walked toward the room adjacent to his own. The door to this room was made of thick ice, radiating an intense bone-chilling cold. Without hesitation, Winterclaw placed his clawed hand against the door and stood quietly, waiting. A few seconds later, a clicking sound echoed from within and the door unlocked. Winterclaw pushed it open and stepped inside. A frigid wind rushed out to greet him, its icy touch scattering frost across his snow-white fur. Yet, his expression remained unchanged, unfazed by the bitter cold. He closed the door behind him, sealing the icy wind inside. "How are your injuries?" he asked in a calm voice, his gaze fixed on the white-haired man seated atop a 2-meter-high platform of ice. The man's legs hung over the edge, his body surrounded by the cold winds of the chamber. These winds spun around the man, slowly seeping into his body as if they were part of him. The man had silver-colored pupils, and the sclera of his eyes was a dark, inky black. His pointed ears bore golden earrings, each adorned with a pale blue gemstone. There was no discernible aura around him, as if he were an ordinary man, yet the air itself seemed to shift around him, responding to his presence. "It's fine," Mithranor said in a low voice before effortlessly jumping down from the platform. The icy wind that had enveloped him scattered in all directions, pushed away by an invisible force. He shook off the frost clinging to his white hair and turned to Winterclaw. "I have lost track of her," Winterclaw said, his voice heavy with frustration. "A few days ago, I felt her presence in Utopia, but soon after, I could no longer sense her. It was as if she had disappeared from the world entirely." Mithranor raised his head, his silver eyes calm as they met Winterclaw's. "You and she were born from the same source," he said. "Normally, it should be impossible for you to lose your connection to her while both of you are in the same plane. The only explanation is that someone with an extraordinarily powerful stealth ability has hidden her." "Anastasia?" Winterclaw asked, though his deep blue eyes were filled with certainty rather than doubt. "Who else but her?" Mithranor replied, shaking his head. "After that guy destroyed my essence clone on Earth, he must have taken her back to Utopia and enlisted Anastasia's help to hide her location." Winterclaw's beastly face darkened at Mithranor's words, his icy blue eyes gleaming with a deadly light. "Does that mean he knows about her origin?" he asked, his voice grave. "And my connection to her? It would be strange if he did not," Mithranor said. "She must have regained some of her memories and told him. And given that you sent people after her, it would not be hard for him to figure everything out." Winterclaw's expression became increasingly grim. A dangerous coldness flashed through his gaze. If he brought her back and needed Anastasia's help, that must mean he took her to the Shadow Realm, right? That woman is there. If he wanted her assistance, he would have had to go there. But Mithranor shook his head. "Before coming here, I left behind several methods to detect his return to the Shadow Realm, but none of them were triggered," he said. "That means he never went back." Winterclaw frowned. If he never returned to the Shadow Realm, then how did that wretched woman manage to hide her location? Mithranor gave Winterclaw a long, unimpressed look, as if questioning whether he was truly that dense or merely pretending to be. "What?" Winterclaw snapped, narrowing his eyes. Mithranor sighed before responding in a calm, even tone. If he did not return to the Shadow Realm but Anastasia was still able to help him, then the answer is obvious: Anastasia is no longer in the Shadow Realm. She left long ago, and the one maintaining the Shadow Realm in her absence must be her essence clone. Winterclaw's eyes widened in shock, but his surprise quickly gave way to cold calculation. If it is only her essence clone in the shadow realm, he said, his voice filled with eager anticipation, shouldn't we take advantage of this and launch an attack? If you wish to die, go ahead, Mithranor said flatly, his expression unchanging. The shadow realm is under her control. Challenging a powerful enemy within their own domain is nothing short of suicidal. And besides, do you really think that man wouldn't have left behind a contingency plan in case someone tried to attack his territory? Winterclaw's expression darkened, but he couldn't deny the truth in Mithranor's words. He clenched his clawed fists but remained silent. Mithranor observed his reaction but said nothing more. In truth, he wanted to tell Winterclaw that even if Anastasia's presence in the Shadow Realm was only an essence clone carrying around only 80% of her original power, she could still annihilate him with ease the moment he stepped inside. We should wait and observe, Mithranor finally said, changing the subject as he turned and walked toward the exit. If he knows the truth about that girl, then sooner or later, he will come for you. As he stepped out of the icy room, his figure gradually faded, becoming more and more transparent. Within seconds, he had vanished completely, his final words lingering in the freezing air. When he makes his move against you, we will seize the moment and end everything in one strike. Chapter 1308 Abnormal Evolution Part 1. You have successfully broken through to rank 4. The moment the notification appeared before his eyes, Evan's illusionary world, no, it should be called his real world now, shrunk back and transformed into a small portal, suspended above his head. With a thought, he reabsorbed the real world into his body, where it merged seamlessly with his primordial monarch core. As the real world merger with his core, a terrifying fluctuation of law energy washed over him, strengthening every aspect of his being, his body, spirit, and very essence. His flesh and soul fused with the power of laws, granting him an extraordinary resilience. Now, even if his physical body were to be destroyed, he could restore it as long as he did not exhaust his power of law. As his existence underwent this transformation, Evan once again perceived the surrounding law energy, the same energy he had briefly sensed after consuming the law resonance potion. But unlike before, when the sensation was an external effect induced by the potion, this time, he could feel it naturally. The process of change lasted nearly an entire day, during which his body and spirit were continuously strengthened. When everything finally settled, Evan opened his eyes. Feeling the overwhelming power of law contained within him, he couldn't help but sigh. I had enough power to kill rank 4 core evolvers even when I was still at rank 3. But that was simply because my raw power, my stat points and authorities, were abnormally high. But now, as he spoke, a deep purple energy flickered around his fist. Clenching his hand, he watched as the space around it warped and twisted before abruptly collapsing, forming a void rift. Now, I can kill them even without relying on my high stats and authorities. Curious about his new state, Evan checked his status window. Name: Evan Azroth. Race: Eltern. Current syncretization rate between your race, Eltern, and the origin universe, 78%. Rank: beginner level of rank 4. Bloodline: Doombringer. Partially awakened 3rd stage. Strength: 18,000. Right pointing arrow 33,000. Agility: 15,000. Right pointing arrow 29,000. Endurance: 30,000. Right pointing arrow 45,000 plus 45,000 due to the effect of ruler's authority. World essence: 26,000. Right pointing arrow 50,000. Stamina: 16,000. Right pointing arrow 28,000. Intelligence: 14,500. Right pointing arrow 27,000 plus 2,700 due to false progenitor title. Primordial shadow energy: 17,000. Right pointing arrow 40,000. Void law seal: 0.1%. Current understanding of the conceptual energy of soul: 0.8%. Current understanding of the conceptual energy of death: 0.6%. Current understanding of the conceptual energy of space: 0.5%. Bound flame: prismatic fire. Soul weapon: halberd of destruction. Skills: shadow walk, shadow storage, dimensional shadow bullet, ice chains, wind manipulation. Voidborn invocation: life mark, dragon force. Pupil skills: eyes of the abyss, null eyes, gaze of monarch. Physique: shadow monarch physique. Titles: Rule Breaker, creator of the primordial shadow realm, the Cursed One, owner of Eldoria City, false progenitor. Class: Shadow Necromancer. Racial skill: Reaper's Wrath. Class skills: Shadow Resurrection, Shadow Save, Shadow Senses, Shadow Possession, Shadow Nails, Death Transfer, Growth Link, Soul Absorption, Soul Fusion, Shadow Clone, Shadow World, Shadow Forge. Racial skill: Reaper's Wrath. Authorities: Master of Shadows, Death Guardian, Realm Guardian, Void Manipulation. Ruler's Authority: Soul Keeper. Unlike his previous breakthroughs, he had not awakened any new authority or skill this time. Other than the substantial increase in his stat points, only one new addition stood out on his status window. Void Law Seal, 0.1%. Evan narrowed his eyes as he stared at the newly added Void Law Seal and fell into deep thought. I wonder if I can increase it using the Rune of Absorption, he muttered, recalling the plans he had devised when he engraved the Rune of Absorption onto the energy veins of the energy devouring skill. Well, I will find out once I try it. But before that, his gaze shifted to the Rune of Evolution, which was engraved on his chest, and he frowned. What happened to that strange energy that was brewing within it? Since his breakthrough to mid-level rank 3, Evan had sensed an unusual energy forming within the Rune of Evolution. This mysterious energy was also the reason why the high-level void crystal and the scarlet blood rose inside the evolution space of the rune had evolved so rapidly. Despite countless attempts, he had never been able to determine the nature of this energy, and it had still been brewing when he began his breakthrough to rank 4. Yet now, as he examined the Rune of Evolution, he realized that the energy had completely vanished. I could feel it just a day ago. That means it disappeared during the time my body was transforming due to the power of law and my illusionary world fully evolved into a real world, Evan murmured, his expression thoughtful as he examined his body. However, despite his scrutiny, he found no trace of the strange energy within himself. His attention shifted to the Void Law Seal, but there was nothing unusual about it either. Speaking of which, I still need to check what kind of change the Origin Essence brought to my Law Seal earlier. He suddenly remembered, focusing his perception on the Law Seal. He could tell that it was different from before it had merged with the Origin Essence, but he couldn't quite pinpoint what had changed. I have never seen the Law Seal of another rank 4 core evolver before. If I want to find out how mine differs from the others, I need to observe the Law Seal of another rank 4 core evolver, Evan muttered to himself before shifting his focus back to the missing energy from the Rune of Evolution. If it didn't affect my body or my Law Seal, then the only place left is. Following his intuition, Evan turned his attention to his real world, and within his real world, it didn't take long for him to detect traces of the energy that had once brewed within the Rune of Evolution. The energy from the rune has merged with my real world, he noted, raising an eyebrow in confusion. He couldn't understand why the energy had merged with his world, or more importantly, what its purpose was. Using his connection to the real world, he observed its state carefully. He soon discovered that under the influence of this mysterious energy, his world was undergoing a slow transformation. The changes were minimal, so subtle that if he hadn't had full control over his world, he wouldn't have even noticed them. Rune of Evolution, could it be that this energy is somehow evolving my world? Evan muttered, considering the rune's name. But he wasn't entirely convinced. Damn it, there are so many things I don't understand, like the changes in my Law Seal, the slow evolution of my world, and much more. Instead of racking my brain over all of this, I might as well rely on my lifeline, experts' advice. With that thought, he turned his head, his gaze landing on the female dragon hooligan, the one who had assaulted him and was now waiting for him. Chapter 1309. There is a dark room up there. Evan walked toward Anastasia, who had returned not long after he began his breakthrough to rank 4. However, she had remained near the entrance of the training room, making sure not to disturb him. Done? Anastasia asked as she saw him finally stepping out of the training room. Evan nodded, and to Anastasia's surprise, he suddenly pulled her into a hug. Just as she was starting to suspect that her earlier assault had awakened a new attribute in him. Paw! Hiss! A loud slap echoed through the air, followed by the sound of a dragon woman sucking in a breath from the stinging pain. Anastasia instantly jumped away from Evan, rubbing her buttocks as she looked at him in disbelief. What the hell are you doing? she shouted while using her power to ease the sharp sting. Sorry, honey, Evan said smoothly, without blinking. My power increased significantly due to my breakthrough. As a result, I couldn't control it properly and accidentally hurt you. A blatant lie. Of course, Evan was actually very satisfied, not just with the payback, but also with the bounciness. Oh no. What he meant was, he was satisfied that his newfound strength was enough to actually hurt this female thug. Anastasia's mouth twitched at his shameless excuse. She immediately knew this was revenge for what she had done to him before she left for the Elventian Empire. She thought about slapping his bottom as well to take revenge. However, a sudden thought crossed her mind, and a sneer formed on her lips. What a coward, she mocked. If you had assaulted me the way I did to you, I wouldn't have let you off with just a slap on the butt. Instead, I would have dragged you into a closed dark room and taught you a proper lesson until you honestly admitted your mistake. Evan was stunned when he heard Anastasia's words and stared at her with a dumbfounded look on his face. What are you looking at? She huffed, puffing out her full chest. Do you dare to do to me what I would have done to you if you had messed with me? Black lines appeared on Evan's forehead as he saw the cocky look on her face. He exhaled sharply and nodded with a cold smile. Good, don't regret what you just said. Although he knew she was provoking him on purpose, he didn't care. Now that he had reached rank 4, he was confident he could handle her. Even after coming back from Earth and knowing most of the effects of the Cursed One title, he did not do anything to her because even though she had left most of her power with her essence clone, she still possessed strength far surpassing that of a peak rank 4 core evolver. What was even more troublesome was the fact that she was a dragon. The physical defense and raw strength of dragons were among the highest of all species. And as the progenitor of dragons, Anastasia's defense and strength were far greater than any other dragon. If he had tried to do anything with her, there was a very real possibility that his efforts wouldn't even make a dent in her defense, especially when it came to a certain part of her body. Even worse, if he did manage to breach the entrance, he was terrified that she might get too excited during the exercise and accidentally exert too much pressure down there. If that happens, with his previous lack of defense, his lifeline would have undoubtedly been turned into meat paste. Even though he had multiple ways to heal himself, the mere thought of losing his most precious thing made him shudder. Now that I am rank 4 and have consumed dragon blood flowers to strengthen my body and my endurance is close to 100,000 points. I should be able to handle her, right? Although he felt that his current physique was sufficient, a nagging sense of caution lingered in the back of his mind. Maybe I am being too hasty. Should I wait until I reach mid or even peak rank 4 to be on the safe side? Meanwhile, Anastasia, who had been looking smug just moments ago, suddenly froze when she heard Evan's response. Her eyes widened in surprise. But soon, a bright glint appeared in her gaze, and she puffed her chest out even more. Regret? Me? You must be dreaming. With that, she turned on her heel and started walking away. There is a dark room up there. Let's go. I want to see exactly how you plan to make me regret this. Evan was once again speechless. Somehow, instead of him taking her into a room to teach her a lesson, it felt like she was taking him there. Before he could say anything, Anastasia suddenly stopped and glanced back at him, her eyes shining with curiosity. Oh, by the way, how exactly are you going to teach me a lesson? Evan sighed, rubbing his temples. He was about to tell her to stop messing around because he had more important matters to discuss before doing anything, like asking about his lost seal and other issues related to his breakthrough. However, before he could finish speaking, he noticed Anastasia's body trembling slightly. Her eyes widened even further as she looked at him with an increasingly alarmed expression. Don't tell me you have prepared candles and a whip to teach me a lesson. Question mark. Question marks popped up in Evan's head. He stared at Anastasia blankly, completely baffled by what this dragon hooligan was saying. Seeing his blank expression, Anastasia trembled even more and dramatically pointed a finger at him. You are not denying it. That means I am right. Evan took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure. In a deep voice, he said, Stop talking nonsense. I don't have anything like a whip or candles. Let's focus on something important. I wanted to ask you about Myla. Of course, you don't have candles and a whip on you, Anastasia interrupted before he could finish. She then pulled out a whip and a set of candles from her storage ring. Because I stole them from your room while you were out of the closed world of the Dryads. Evan. He stared at the items in Anastasia's hands with an increasingly strange expression, wondering where the hell she had even bought them. I have read that most dragons are perverts, but I didn't expect her to be the same. As that thought passed through his mind, Anastasia suddenly threw the whip and candles at him. Evan instinctively stretched out his hand, catching them midair. When he looked back at Anastasia, whose eyes were practically glowing with excitement, he let out a long sigh and quietly stored them away in his storage ring. Chapter 13:10 Abnormal Evolution Part 2. Anastasia nodded when she saw Evan putting away the candles and whip, then turned around once again, intending to head toward the dark, closed room upstairs. But before she could take even 2 steps forward, swish, the sharp sound of something cutting through the air came from behind her, and in the next moment, a whip coiled tightly around her waist. Huh! Startled, Anastasia barely had time to react before a powerful force yanked her backward. I know you are very eager, Evan said as he pulled her back, but can you please listen to me first before you take me? No. Before I take you to the dark room. Mid-sentence, he nearly forgot that he was the one who needed to teach Anastasia a lesson and almost blurted out the wrong words. Anastasia paused when she heard his words, then finally nodded. She leaned back against him without turning around and asked curiously. What do you want to ask me? Evan put away the whip in his hand and, after thinking for a moment, decided to start with his law seal and real world. My law seal and real world are different from other people's. Can you check them and tell me if there is something wrong with them? Hearing Evan, Anastasia's expression changed instantly. She turned around with a serious look, her usual playful demeanor disappearing. Having something wrong with one's law seal or real world could be fatal. If anything went wrong with them and they collapsed, a core evolver would suffer severe injuries, and in the worst-case scenario, they might even die. Although Anastasia was certain that Evan wouldn't die even if his real world and law seal collapsed, the damage it would cause to his core would take an incredibly long time to recover. Don't be so serious, Evan said when he noticed her concerned expression. It's not the kind of problem you are thinking about. He stretched out his palm, and as he did, a dark, deep purple aura covered it, matching the color of his transformed law seal. At the center of this aura, the power of the void law flickered ominously, distorting the space around it. Anastasia raised an eyebrow at the sight of the unusual energy. With a simple wave of her hand, the power of the void law separated from Evan's palm and floated toward her, stopping just in front of her. She examined it carefully for a few minutes, her expression shifting from curiosity to surprise, and then from surprise to shock. There are traces of the origin of the void law in it, she muttered in a low voice, feeling utterly stunned. Traces of the origin of the void law. Evan frowned in confusion. What's that? You shouldn't have come into contact with the origin of laws until you reached at least rank 6, Anastasia said seriously. Even after reaching rank 6, it's not guaranteed that you would be able to come into contact with the origin of the void law. Evan stared at her blankly, as if silently asking her to speak in a language a simpleton like him could understand. Anastasia thought for a moment before speaking again. You already know that to advance from beginner level rank 4 to mid-level rank 4, you need to nourish your law seal using the power of the void law, right? Evan nodded. His current law seal was at 0.1%, and in order to become a mid-level rank 4 core evolver, he needed to raise it to 50%. From 0.1% to 49.99%, this was the beginner level of rank 4. To reach mid-level, he had to push it to 50%. From 50% to 99%, he would be in the mid-level rank 4 stage. To become a peak rank 4 core evolver, his law seal had to reach 100%. Although the last stage only required an increase of 1%, it was still the most difficult barrier for core evolvers. Many rank 4 core evolvers got stuck at this level, unable to complete it even after thousands of years. Seeing Evan nod, Anastasia looked back at the dark, deep purple law power in front of her and spoke in a serious voice. The origin of law power is somewhat similar. After becoming a rank 6 core evolver, you need to integrate the origin of the law into your world to increase your rank. Before reaching rank 6, it's impossible for anyone to come into contact with the origin of laws because they lack the ability to integrate it into their world. But this Anastasia trailed off and looked at Evan strangely. How did you integrate the origin of the void law into your law seal? Evan's mouth twitched when he saw her strange expression and he had a feeling this wasn't normal. Sighing, he told her everything. You mean, everything happened on its own, and you didn't do anything? Yes, Evan shrugged. I never tried to merge the origin essence, but it fused with my law seal all on its own. Anastasia fell into deep thought, her gaze thoughtful. By the way, Evan added, is there any actual benefit to this? Or is it just a fancy name with no real use? Anastasia was speechless when she heard him and sighed. If you understood the true power of the origin of the void law, you wouldn't be asking such a ridiculous question, she said, shaking her head before looking at him seriously. You also said something was wrong with your real world, show it to me. Evan didn't say anything and simply released his real world. A portal, dancing on Newton's grave appeared above his head, completely ignoring gravity as it hovered there, suspended in midair. Anastasia used her spiritual senses to carefully observe Evan's real world.